Mercy is the disease of the soul that spreads weakness. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Next, on So What? Hi, I'm Chris Dorman, and welcome back to So What? We are continuing our study of the Beatitudes, and this week we're looking at the fifth Beatitude. Blessed are the merciful, for they, and only they, shall receive mercy. What does that mean? When you hear the term mercy, what comes to your mind? For me, I work in law, and I've worked in law all of my life, starting in high school, actually. And at one point, I was on the career path of becoming a lawyer until Pastor Bob entered my life. So when I think of the term mercy, I think of it primarily in a judicial sense, that the guilty do not receive what they deserve. And that's perfectly appropriate when thinking of the Christian life, isn't it? We are guilty sinners. We are poor in spirit. We understand that we are nothing, that we have nothing, that everything is all of grace. We mourn. Why? Because we recognize that we are sinful. God has been merciful to us, and we receive comfort for his gracious forgiveness. And so I have always looked at mercy as the call of the Christian to be forgiving to others. I was wrong. The word that our Lord uses here means so much more than that. It's such a broader term that encompasses so much more that I gotta tell you, I've been really moved this week, humbled by, again, my failure to really grasp the depth of everything our Lord has taught us. The word that is used here, look at the Facebook page, okay? And I'll have all the particular stuff, all the technical stuff, okay? But what you need to understand, what I need to understand, that the word that our Lord uses here is not talking about just a judicial remedy, that we are guilty and now we are not because of the imputed righteousness of Christ. No, it means so much more than that. It means so much more than that. It means, beloved, mercy is another word for compassion. It's another word. It's used all throughout the Old Testament for God's loving kindness. The word is mercy. It means active compassion. Wherever you see suffering, wherever I see suffering, wherever I encounter pain, Jesus is commanding that we must take steps to alleviate that suffering. That's what it means. That's what, to be merciful, it means. It's active compassion. It's not enough that you hear a sad song. Like, you remember those, here in the United States, we've got commercials for the Humane Society, where a Sarah McLachlan song comes on, Angels. And it's a very sad, mournful song, and you see these terrible pictures of hurting animals, and they make you feel guilty. They make you feel sad. Why? And they do that for a reason, because they want you to give money. Same with all those commercials about starving kids in Africa and starving kids maybe where you live, wherever. They want you to give money. They want you to not just feel bad, but to act. And beloved, that's what Jesus is saying here. It's not enough that you feel bad. It's not enough that it makes you sad. You must act. You must act on that feeling. And talking about this passage, A.W. Pink said this. He said, this mercy is something more than a feeling. It is an operative principle. It not only stirs the heart, but it moves the hand to render help unto those in need. For the one cannot be severed from the other, so far from it being a well shut up or a fountain sealed. This mercy is a copious source of acts of beneficence, from which issue streams of blessing. It does not exhaust itself in profitless words, but is accompanied by helpful deeds. That is what it means. That's what Jesus is saying. And why does this flow from the last beatitude? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they and only they shall be filled. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who desire above all else to see Christ formed in them, to see Christ formed in others. When you think of Jesus, what do you think? what comes to your mind? Compassion. Selfless giving to others. That was his entire life. And beloved, that's to be your entire life. Your entire life is to be about sacrificially giving of yourselves, of your time, of your money, of your prayer, of your attention, to alleviate suffering, to bring glory to Christ. That is what Jesus did, and that's what we are supposed to do. Think of Luke chapter 10 and the parable of the Good Samaritan, okay? Remember, the guy comes to Jesus and says, well, I got to love my neighbor as I love myself. Who is my neighbor? And in that parable, Jesus says essentially, everybody is your neighbor. At the end, when Jesus has discussed, he's told the parable, he says, now, who was a neighbor to that man on that road who was beaten and ignored by everybody but the Samaritan? Who was his neighbor? And what is the answer? What is the answer that is given? The one who showed him mercy. The one who was actively compassionate. The one who went out of his way to meet a need. Jesus says, go and do likewise. Beloved, Jesus tells you today, go and do likewise. And then you shall experience even more abundant blessings from him. That is what this beatitude is telling us. So what about the introduction? Mercy is the disease of the soul that spreads weakness. That is from a Roman philosopher of Jesus' day. And that's their understanding of what mercy is. Mercy was seen as a character flaw. If you had a position of power, if you were in a position of strength, in a position of authority, the last thing you would do would be merciful, because that would be a sign of weakness that others might seek to capitalize on. Throughout this series, we've looked at how Jesus' teachings in the Beatitudes are sort of countercultural for the people of his day. Happy are the sad, happy are the hungry, happy are the poor, happy are the meek. Doesn't make any sense. Happy are the merciful in his day to Jesus' audience, just as crazy. Just as crazy. But think about the world we live in. Who do we primarily look out for? What does our world say? You got to look out for number one. You got to look out for you. You got to take care of you. In speaking about this particular beatitude, the great theologian D.A. Carson said this: I am persuaded that should the Spirit of God usher in another period of revival in the Western world, one of the earliest signs of it will be the admission of spiritual bankruptcy, which finds its satisfaction in God and his righteousness, and goes on to be richly merciful toward others. You want to see revival? Do you want to see Christ exalted through the land? Do you want to see people saved? Do you want to see the world transformed for the gospel, for the glory of Jesus Christ? Then be merciful, just as Jesus was. Think about it, okay? Think about how you might honor Jesus, how you might reflect Jesus to a hurting world by living the way he did and being actively compassionate, showing that kind of mercy to others. Thank you for tuning in, my friends. Happy Reformation Day, and I'll talk to you next week.